Ah! Well, hello there, traveler. Wicked one tonight, isn't it? This night feels darker, more desperate. Pull you a bit of ground and warm your bones for a while. A night like tonight, with a fire like this one? Well, it just begs for a story, don't you think? I think it begs for one desperately. I never write. I never call. You're right, I'm a terrible son. The man looked himself in the eye as he repeated this last part of his speech over and over. I'm a terrible son. His reflection nodded in agreement. Okay, I can do this. He took a deep breath before putting on the jackal mask, slowly, so he could watch it devour his face in the mirror. He made a few adjustments to the burgundy-crushed velvet robe he wore before a knock on the bathroom door startled him back into the present. Ralph? Yeah, Mom? Ralph's voice sounded small, muffled by the mask. We're starting, hon. He took one last look in the mirror before he opened the door and stepped out into the dim hallway. His mother stood there, unrecognizable in her attire. Her robe was red like his, but much longer and flowing. The skirt of it pulled out around her, so that as she walked, it gave the illusion that she was floating. Her mask was fanged and adorned with 8 sparkling gems, a curled spider's face. At first, the two of them walked in silence. They passed by the door to his childhood room, and he saw a falter in her steps, a slight hesitation. Most people wouldn't have been able to notice, but he'd watched her all his life. Mom, Ralph started. You know, it would be nice to see you. She turned to him, took his hand. The skin on her fingers felt thin and cool, like wet paper. A hint of jasmine from her favorite lotion tickled his nose. More than once a year? Her voice broke, and he raised his hand to one of the fangs on her mask. I know. I knew it would. He fought the odd tightening in his throat, as if his lines in this annual play were all of a sudden hard to say. I never call. I'm a horrible son. Don't do that. She turned away and continued their journey, his hand still in hers. It's me, not him. You aren't horrible. His mother sighed as they made it to the basement door and stopped. She turned back to him and pulled up his mask, looked him in the face, traced down from his forehead to his nose, along his lips. You're my son. His too. That tightness had gotten worse. Words burned now, hot with a mess of emotions he had never been able to untangle. He doesn't know what it's like for us. Not anymore. I don't think he ever really did. But we need this. She paused as screaming echoed up from the basement. You need this. At that, Ralph took her hand away and pulled the mask back down. With a nod, the two opened the door and descended into darkness. The screaming weakened to anguished sobs as they got halfway down. Now he could hear faint chatting, the clinking of cups and plates. Before the two took the final step, a booming laugh caused both of them to jump. Great, whooping laughter that made the liquid between his ears ripple. It shook the foundation. The house above them creaked and groaned. It came from the other side of the room, past the cleaning supplies and Christmas decorations, where the false wall gave way to the chamber he'd helped build all those years ago. He's happy today. She took a moment to fix her mask before entering. Let's see how long it lasts. Ralph took a deep breath before he followed in behind her. At their entrance, the chatting stopped, and the screaming started again, now with renewed desperation and horror. Stretched out on a table was a naked man, his hands and feet nailed to the corners. Candles were lit on a few stands nearby, on either side of his head. Seated at his feet were Ralph's sister, her mask in the shape of a dog. On his left were the twins. Their matching baboon faces smiled at each other as the two continued their conversation. "I still don't see why we need to wear them now," the twin on the left said. "It's tradition. You can't piss on tradition. I won't allow it." The one on the right admonished him. "Don't you fucking ignore me." The man on the table continued to shout and sob. "You're sick," he cried. Tears and snot flooded down his face and into his mouth. This caused him to cough and send spittle flying into the air. Some hit the twin on the right. He flew into a rage and began hitting the man on the face, over and over, till a giant hand came out of the darkness at the head of the table. It took hold of him, so large it covered his shoulder and the entirety of his upper arm. The hand caught the candlelight with a glassy shine, color jade and cyan. It looked carved from some smooth river stone or beetle shell. "Easy now. So wanted to bruise." The voice from the dark brought with it a static melody, charged sounds that danced and buzzed in the ear. At this, the man on the table devolved into pitiful whimpers. A spout of urine shot up and puddled around his waist. "Oh, we got a gusher!" That laughter again shook the house, and two massive fists slammed down on either side of the poor man's head as the head of the family entered fully into the light. Its face was as wide as the moon as it leaned over their latest victim. Eyes without number looked down on him from their sockets, and the puckered gash of its mouth turned up in a mockery of a smile. Ralph and his mother took their seats at the right-hand side of the table. Ralph tried to keep his eyes on anything but his father. They settled on the trembling body before him. How old? Ralph wondered. 18? Couldn't be more than 20. "And look who we have here." The thing that had created him petted his head with what might be called affection. This knocked the mask off. His family froze. His sister Betty gasped, and the twins recoiled. His mother squeezed his hand under the table. "Big bro, you..." The left twin started, only for the other to cut him off. "Shut it." It lifted up his chin, forced Ralph to stand as it looked him over. "Been gone too long. Not wise to starve yourself, you know." The vibrations of its voice took on a jerky, discordant hum of anger, disappointment, a hint of pain. I know, Ralph's throat burned as if hot coals been forced down it. "You're right, I should have. I'm a terror." "He's back with us now." His mother stood up and took the giant hand in both of her small ones. She kissed one of the knuckles, then another and another. "Our oldest, home for dinner." "Hungry, is he?" it asked as it stroked her cheek with a finger as big as her fist. She laughed. "He's all skin and bones." This got a few giggles from her daughter. "Please. Oh, please, God." The man's voice was barely a whisper now. Broken. "Please." None of them paid him any attention. "Well, are you?" it asked Ralph. He knew it wanted to hear him say it, make him beg. Ralph half expected that old indignance to stir inside him, but that desire to rebel against the horror of what they were had been driven from him. All that was left now was the desperation that always brought him back. "Yes." "Well then, let's eat." A long proboscis extended from its mouth, a brownish red with thick hairs that flared up in rings that spiraled down the length in a hypnotic pattern. The foul appendage first slapped against the man's forehead, This brought in fresh screams. It then flopped around, the tip opening and closing, searching for the right spot. The proboscis found his left eye and pushed inside the socket. The noises the man made as the fleshy tube shoved his eye out of the way were bestial, barely human. He strained against the bindings, his whole body contorted and shook as his brain was shredded. Their patriarch made a grunt, and a loud pop could be heard as the man jerked once, then went silent and still. His stomach swelled, then his chest, arms, and legs, as the tube pumped fluid into him. The skin began to change color, first turning a deep purple, then lightening to an azure blue. Golden sweat began to leach out from his pores, and Ralph's mouth watered at the sight. His two brothers tore off their masks as their father finished his task and withdrew from the body. A loud crunch drew all their attention to the end of the table. His sister looked up at them, the man's foot in her mouth. "What? The toes are the best part." At that, the rest of the family tore into the body, all but Ralph and their father. Ralph didn't have to turn to know it was watching him, waiting. He slowly took off his own mask and lifted the man's arm to his lips. The skin felt like gelatin, but instead of revulsion, Ralph felt delight. That first bite burst like an overripe grape, and the golden ichor flooded his mouth. After that, all he could feel was the joy of consuming and the dancing notes of his father's laughter.